Louder, please. I think you should be a little louder. I don't know if you have a microphone.
Hello, my name is Dylan Fitzgerald, and today I'm going to be doing my informational speech on wrestling. Have you ever thought about doing wrestling? Well, in this speech, I'm here to inform you on some of the topics of the sport, like the history, what it is, and some of the techniques. According to the University of Missouri, sports are not only good for being active, but they make you feel better. And whenever you feel better, you release endorphins. Endorphins are the feel-good hormone of your body. First off, we'll talk about the history of wrestling. High school wrestling is known as folk style wrestling. Now, and other high schoolers also compete in Roman Greco wrestling. And Greco wrestling is where you throw your opponent, and it's a little bit more difficult than the high school folk style. Wrestling became a thing around 17,000 to 15,000 years ago, and they discovered them in cave drawings. Now, a lot of ancient civilizations utilized wrestling as entertainment. Now, some of these ancient civilizations were known as the ancient Babylons, Egypt, ancient Greeks, and so on. According to Wikipedia, there is no exact civilization that has started wrestling, but it is also shown up in the Olympics. Now, I'd like to move on to what wrestling is. Wrestling is a combative sport where there are two people on the mat. And on the mat, there is a big circle, and that is your inbound zone. If you go out of the circle, you're out of bounds. Now, these two people will have their shoes on, which these shoes are special shoes called wrestling shoes, and they have a special rubber on the bottom that will give you grip that you need on the mat. And they also provide a good amount of ankle support. Now, these two wrestlers and the ref will have bands on. Now, the wrestlers will have ankle bands, and the ref will have wristbands. Now, depending on whoever you are, sometimes you get the red or the green. It doesn't really matter. Just depends on what the table gives you. Now, if you are red, the wrestler will have a red anklet band, and your opponent will have the green. The goal of wrestling is to get the pin or win by points. Now we'll move on to some positions. Now there are 4 different positions: top, bottom, neutral, and referees. First off, you'll start off with neutral when you are in the first period, and there are 3 2-minute periods in wrestling. Now with neutral, you and your opponent are facing each other, and you are trying to get the takedown. And depending on how your opponent is set up, you'll figure that out. Now next, we'll move on to top. Top is when you are on top of the other person, and they're on their hands or knees, and you have the better advantage to therefore get the pin and win the match. Bottom is when you're on the bottom, and your goal is to try and slide out of there and get the reversal and get on top and get your points back. Referees is what happens when you go into second period, and the ref will flip a coin, and depending on the side of the coin that it lands on, there's red or green. And if you're on the red side and it lands on the red, you have the first choice. You either can do top, bottom, neutral, or defer. And defer is where you can let your opponent get the choice first, and you will then therefore get the choice in third period if you last that long. Now we're going to move on to some of the techniques of wrestling. The topics that I'll talk about are shots, takedowns, and pins. Now with your shots, it depends on how your opponent is and how they move. With these shots though, what my favorite is to do is I like to duck under, and that is when your opponent has their hands on your shoulders or your neck, and you duck under it, and then you can either go to a double or a single. That's when we'll move on to the takedowns. Now, the 2 takedowns that I'll be talking about today are the single leg or the double leg. Now, the single leg is when you shoot in and you have your head on the inside and you kind of hook their leg up, and you can do a treetop is what I like to call it, and that's where you throw the leg over your head and have the person fall. Now, a double leg is my favorite, and that is when you rush in and you put your knee right in between their feet, and you have your shoulder also on top of that knee. And from there, then you will chop up the back of their knees and you'll break them down when you push into them. Now, two pin combinations that I'll be talking about today are the half Nelson or the wing. Now, with the half Nelson, that is when you have your hand or your arm under their arm and you have your hand on the back of their neck. And with the half Nelson, the goal is to lift that arm up as much as you can and kind of get out to the side and roll them over. And with the wing, you go for having the wing on the back like this. It has to stay at 90 degrees. Otherwise, the ref will flag you for potentially dangerous. And when you have that wing, you always want to make sure that the elbow is in your sternum and you kind of get out to the side a little bit and you push into that, and it gives the wrestler that you're doing it to a decent amount of pain, and they will therefore run over. With that, wrestling is a very difficult sport and has a lot of history behind it. I have informed you on some of the history, fundamentals, positions, and takedowns of folk style wrestling. Thank you.